This video is about textbook section 7-4. This is about cell specialization. Alright, so how many cells make up a unicellular organism? Remember our prefixes, uni and mono mean the same thing. So this would be a one-celled creature. And if you think about it for a minute, a one-celled creature, its one cell is its entire body. So that one cell has to do every single thing that that creature needs to do to stay alive. That's what I have in that second bullet there for you. A good analogy of this is think about the video that we had watched back when we were studying ecology about Dick Pernecki, who moved to Twin Lakes, Alaska. He was the only person there. So he had to know a little bit about everything to keep himself alive out there. Think about it. He had to have some medical training if he got sick or injured himself. He had to know how to repair his roof if his roof had a leak. He had to know how to prepare food. He had to know how to split firewood. He had to know how to get fresh drinking water. I mean, he was it. He had to know how to do everything for himself, or else he wasn't going to survive. That's what life is like for a unicellular organism. That one-celled organism, like the one you see up here, it has to be able to do everything for itself. It can't rely on other cells to do things for it. It has to do everything. So what we have here is a euglena, and on the left is the actual microscopic image of it. And these are found in ponds and lakes, fresh water, things like that. And on the right is just an artist's rendition of it, trying to show you what all the different parts are. And what I want you to take away from this picture is that, number one, this is a one-celled creature. And if you take a look, it's got a nucleus in the middle, storing its DNA, so we know it's a eukaryote. But then take a look at all the other pieces this has. It has chloroplast, so it can get its own food. Up top, it has an eye spot. That allows it to see dark or light, so it can get itself over to the light. Well, if it's going to need to go towards where the light is, it needs that flagellum, so it can actually move itself around. It has mitochondria down towards the bottom. Those are labeled, and those take the food that the chloroplasts make and actually makes it into an energy that cells can use. So there are many parts here because this creature, it can only rely on itself. It can't rely on other cells to provide for any of its needs, and that's how life is like for a one-celled creature. Just like Dick Pernecki up in Twin Lakes, Alaska, he had to know how to do a little bit of everything if he was going to survive. That's how these cells must operate. Now, you and I, we are multicellular organisms. We have different cells in our body, and they've undergone something called specialization. The cells in your body are not all exactly the same. They have developed in different ways to do different jobs, so that one cell in your body doesn't have to do every single thing in your body. And that's what I've written down here, if you could write down that bottom bullet. Multicellular organisms like us, we have specialized cells, and we coordinate those so they work together, so that each of these cells each do some of the life processes to make sure the organism lives. All right, so moving right along, the vocabulary word associated with all this is right in the middle here, cell specialization. So get that noted. Cell specialization means that cells specialize. They're not all exactly the same. So cell specialization only happens in a multicellular organism, and this is where cells in a multicellular organism develop in different ways to do different jobs. A unicellular organism cannot have a specialized cell. If the guy living in Twin Lakes, Alaska, if all he knew how to do was build cabins, he would never make it. He wouldn't know how to treat himself medically. He wouldn't know how to capture food. He wouldn't know how to do any of this stuff. So unicellular creatures cannot do the cell specialization. They have to stay a little more generic, a little more general. They can't be specialized like the cells in our bodies can. The cells in our bodies can rely on one another to keep us alive. All right, so I think of cell specialization sort of like living in a town, as opposed to living out by yourself in Alaska, okay? Living in a town, people can specialize in what they're good at. So Mr. Rollins is a teacher. I can teach students, and I don't need to grow my own food too, so my family has enough to eat. No, a farmer can do that. They have a special job where they're producing food. If I have a problem with my house, I don't need to know how to do construction. There's a specialized person who can come fix that for me. If I want pizza on Friday night, I don't necessarily need to have a pizza oven and exactly know how to make the best pizza in the world, because there's a specialized person who knows how to make good pizza. So living in a town, different people have different specialties, and everybody works together and takes care of each other's needs. That's what cell specialization is. The different cells in your body can do different jobs. Everything works together to make sure your body gets all of its needs taken care of. All right, now let's go through some examples here. This will be the last slide that we do. So, muscle cells. Think for a minute. What do muscle cells do? Well, muscle cells, hopefully you came up with, they allow for movement. All right, movement requires a lot of energy. You know this if you're in a sport. If you're in phys ed, you need a lot of physical energy to make your muscles move your body around. Now, muscle cells have a unique structure that allows them to move, but they have every animal cell organelle, just like you're doing in your Cell City project. Okay, all the ones that animal cells would have, muscle cells have. But because they're a special kind of cell, they would be loaded with a certain kind of organelle that makes this energy. So think for a minute, what organelle produces energy? That would be the mitochondria. So muscle cells would be loaded full of mitochondria and have a lot more mitochondria than, say, a skin cell would have. A skin cell doesn't have the energy demands of a muscle cell. So a skin cell would have mitochondria, but just not as much as a muscle cell. And that's what we're talking about here. This was sort of like the last page in that yellow packet that you did, where it had the specialized cells and you had to say what they did and how their shape allows them to do that job. We're not looking at shape so much here, although that's important. Here we're looking at what organelles do they have a lot of to do that special job. So let's do another example. Okay, white blood cells. Think for a minute if you know what white blood cells do. White blood cells, what they do is they fight infection. Now, how they fight infection is if there were bacteria in your body, your white blood cell would approach it, and if we kind of do a couple pictures here, it would kind of change its shape to take in that foreign particle. Once that foreign particle is inside, then it will break it down and kill it. So that's how our bodies get rid of cells that don't belong in our body. Okay? So now that we know white blood cells, that's what they do. What would they have a lot of? Well, they need a lot of an organelle that could destroy foreign material. So if you think about that, what organelle would they have a lot of? They would have a lot of lysosomes. In your Cell City project, you told me that lysosomes break down unwanted material in a cell, breaks down worn out parts of a cell, foreign particles that may enter the body. Well, white blood cells need a lot of lysosomes then, because they can use the lysosomes to break down those unwanted parts of cells or foreign cells, things like that. Now let's do one more example of the cell specialization idea. It's not just us. This is any multicellular creature. So think about a plant. Plants are made of millions and billions and trillions of cells, okay? So we're thinking about a tree. Leaves are always up high on the tree. What are the leaves doing? What's their purpose? Well, their purpose is to capture sunlight. And they do photosynthesis. That's why leaves are high up in trees, so they could be where the sun is, capture that light, do photosynthesis, and make some food for the tree. Well, if we looked at a leaf under the microscope, which we'll do here in the next days or weeks here, you will see that they would be loaded full of one specific organelle. They would have every organelle They would have mitochondria, they would have nucleus, they would have smooth ER, rough ER, lysosomes. They would have everything, but because of their special job, they would be loaded full of one specific type of organelle. And what that organelle would be, they would be loaded with chloroplasts. When you look at a leaf under the microscope, sometimes that's all you can see because there's so many of them, they almost crowd everything else out. All right, and that's the last thing we had to write down. So just remember, unicellular creatures do not have specialized cells. Their cells stay very generalized. If you've ever heard the expression, a jack of all trades but master of none, that would be like what a unicellular cell is like. It can do a little bit of everything, but it can't specialize and be really good at one thing. Multicellular creatures can have different kinds of special cells throughout their body, and they coordinate those cells so that the organism stays alive. And right here we have 3 examples of that. All right, so if you need to review, please rewind, go into that section of the textbook, section 7-4, and that was this idea of cell specialization.